12, 11, 10. The numbers flashed through Harper Mitchell's mind as time crawled to an inevitable collision, each second stretching like pulled taffy, as 17-year-old Bryce Caldwell advanced with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. The classroom fell silent, except for the soft whir of phone cameras capturing what would become the most viral takedown in Ridgemont High's history. They say violence is never the answer. Harper's voice would later echo through millions of social media feeds, her words carrying the weight of someone who'd learned to speak fluently in the language bullies understood best. Sometimes it's the only way to teach lessons that textbooks can't. But 12 seconds was still an eternity away, and the path to that moment began 3 weeks earlier, when Harper's beat-up Honda Civic first pulled into the faculty parking lot of Ohio's most prestigious public high school. The morning mist clung to her windshield like uncertainty, obscuring her view of the sprawling campus where tradition and privilege had calcified into something that protected predators more than students. She sat motionless for 30 seconds, performing what any observer would assume was a nervous teacher's breathing ritual. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 4. Out through the mouth for 6. To the casual eye, Harper Mitchell looked like every other anxious substitute trying to summon courage for another day of classroom chaos. What they couldn't see was the muscle memory embedded in those breaths, the pre-fight preparation ritual that had once carried her through Division II mixed martial arts championships. Her hands moved through what appeared to be stress relief exercises, fingers interlacing and stretching in patterns that might seem like arthritis prevention to a worried administrator. But each movement was deliberate, each stretch designed to maintain the grip strength that could turn a handshake into a submission hold faster than most people could blink. Harper had spent 6 years perfecting the art of hiding in plain sight, letting the world see a mild-mannered educator while keeping her warrior's edge razor-sharp beneath the surface. The yoga mat visible in her back seat wasn't entirely a deception. Harper did practice meditation and flexibility training. She simply never mentioned that her version of downward dog flowed seamlessly into guard positions, or that her breathing exercises doubled as oxygen efficiency techniques for prolonged grappling sessions. Every aspect of her carefully constructed persona served multiple purposes, creating layers of misdirection that had kept her past buried since the day she'd decided that her fists would never again send another human being to the hospital. Ridgemont High loomed before her like a monument to adolescent hierarchy, its red brick facade and manicured lawns masking the toxic power structures that thrived within. This wasn't Harper's first choice for employment, but 6 months of rejection letters from suburban districts had left her bank account dangerously thin and her options increasingly limited. The position paid $42,000 annually, barely enough to cover her student loans and the modest apartment she'd rented across town. But it represented hope for a fresh start in a profession that might finally give her life meaning beyond the violence she'd left behind. The hallways buzzed with the familiar energy of class changes. 3,000 students navigating social hierarchies with the precision of migrating animals following invisible paths of dominance and submission. Harper walked among them with practiced invisibility, her simple black blazer and neutral expression designed to blend into the institutional background. She'd learned early in her teaching career that standing out was dangerous. Better to observe and adapt than to challenge systems she didn't yet understand. That philosophy lasted exactly 47 minutes, until Bryce Caldwell strutted through her classroom door like he owned not just the space, but everyone in it. 6'3" of artificially enhanced confidence. His quarterback physique moved with the fluid arrogance of someone who'd never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with charm, intimidation, or his family's political connections. His blonde hair caught the fluorescent lighting at angles that seemed too perfect to be natural, and his blue eyes held the calculating coldness of a predator sizing up fresh prey. Behind him came Knox Harrison, whose wrestler's build and permanent scowl advertised his role as Bryce's enforcer, and Tanner Brooks, a wiry social media influencer whose phone stayed perpetually raised to document every moment of their reign of terror. The trio moved through the classroom like sharks through a fish tank, claiming territory through body language alone, while other students instinctively created buffer zones of empty desks around their toxic energy. Harper continued arranging her lesson materials, her movements steady despite the shift in atmosphere that accompanied their entrance. Years of reading opponents had taught her to catalog threats without appearing to notice them, and everything about Bryce Caldwell screamed danger wrapped in privilege. His expensive clothes cost more than most families spent on groceries in a month. His watch gleamed with the kind of Swiss engineering that suggested trust funds rather than summer jobs, and his smile contained all the warmth of Arctic wind. "Fresh meat," Bryce announced to no one in particular, his voice carrying the lazy authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Wonder how long this one lasts before she runs crying to administration about students who don't respect her authority." Knox snorted appreciatively while settling into a back corner seat, his bulk making the plastic chair creak ominously. "My money's on 2 weeks max. These suburban princesses always think they can save us with inspirational posters and group discussions about feelings." Tanner was already positioning his phone for optimal recording angles, his thumb hovering over the live stream button that would broadcast whatever happened next to his 15,000 followers. "This could be content gold," he muttered, eyes bright with anticipation. "Nothing goes viral like a teacher breakdown." Harper finished her setup without acknowledging their commentary, though her peripheral vision tracked every movement, while her mind automatically calculated distances and escape routes. The hand exercises she performed between tasks looked like nervous fidgeting, but each squeeze and release was actually maintaining the conditioning that could turn her grip into a steel trap when necessity demanded it. Her breathing remained controlled, steady, the same rhythm she'd used before stepping into cages against opponents who outweighed her by 50 pounds. "All right," she said finally, her voice cutting through their conversation with surprising authority. "Let's get started. I'm Ms. Mitchell, and I'll be your English teacher for the remainder of the semester." Bryce's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "That's what they all say. Give it 2 weeks, lady. This place eats teachers alive." The comment hung in the air like a challenge, drawing the attention of every student in the room who recognized the opening moves of Bryce's systematic intimidation campaign. Harper had witnessed this dance before, had seen how certain students tested boundaries until they found weakness, then exploited every crack until authority figures either fled or surrendered all pretense of control. "I appreciate your concern for my longevity here," Harper replied calmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "But I've taught in more challenging environments than this. Why don't we focus on what you're going to learn rather than predicting when I'm going to leave?" Knox shifted forward in his seat, muscles tensing at what sounded suspiciously like a teacher who might actually fight back. "More challenging, lady? You look like you just walked out of a suburban coffee shop. What could you possibly know about tough?" The question contained layers of provocation, gender-based dismissal wrapped in class assumptions and delivered with the casual cruelty that had probably sent dozens of educators fleeing toward safer districts. Harper felt something stir in her chest, a familiar heat that she'd spent years learning to control through meditation and careful breathing. Her hands moved through another nervous exercise routine, each movement actually loosening her joints and preparing her nervous system for potential combat. I know that toughness isn't about making noise or intimidating people smaller than you, she said quietly, her tone carrying undertones that made several students sit up straighter. Real strength is facing your problems head-on instead of taking them out on others. It's pushing through difficulty without blaming everyone else for your situation. Bryce's expression darkened as he processed what felt suspiciously like a direct challenge to his established dominance. Respect. He stood slowly, using his height advantage to loom over the classroom. You haven't earned any respect here, Ms. Mitchell. You're just another substitute who thinks she can save us with motivational speeches and classroom management techniques. The territorial display was textbook predator behavior, establishing physical dominance while testing the new authority figure's willingness to submit or escalate. Harper remained perfectly still, her breathing controlled, and even despite every instinct screaming at her to shift into defensive positioning. Years of sparring had taught her to read aggression in micro-expressions, the subtle weight shifts that preceded attacks, the muscle tension that revealed intention before conscious thought could mask it. Knox joined his leader, rising with the kind of deliberate menace that had probably intimidated countless teachers into early retirement. Yeah, we've seen your type before. All talk until things get real. Then you'll run just like the others. Tanner's phone tracked the escalating confrontation, his followers' comments streaming past in real time as viewer numbers climbed steadily. The digital audience was hungry for drama, for the kind of content that made ordinary moments go viral through sheer emotional intensity. What they were about to witness would exceed their wildest expectations. I understand you're testing me, Harper said, her voice maintaining its calm authority despite the tension crackling through the room. That's natural when you've been disappointed by adults before. But here's what's going to happen. She paused, letting the silence stretch until every eye was focused on her. You're going to sit down and we're going to have a productive class. Or you're going to continue this behavior and discover that I'm not like the teachers you've dealt with before. The promise hung between them like a loaded weapon, delivered with such quiet confidence that several students found themselves holding their breath. There was something in Harper's tone that didn't match her suburban appearance, an edge that suggested depths they hadn't expected to find. Bryce smiled, but the expression contained no warmth whatsoever. Are you threatening us, Ms. Mitchell? Because that would be very unprofessional. My aunt might have some concerns about teachers who can't maintain appropriate boundaries with students. The casual mention of family connections was a calculated power play, the kind of veiled threat that had probably neutralized countless challenges to his authority. Bryce Caldwell was accustomed to operating in a system where his surname carried more weight than any teacher's authority, where administrative protection flowed from family relationships rather than institutional justice. Harper nodded slowly, recognizing the tactic while filing away the reference to his aunt for future consideration. You're absolutely right. Threats would be unprofessional. That's why I'm making you a promise instead. As long as you're in my classroom, you'll treat yourself and your classmates with respect. If you can't do that, then we'll have a different kind of conversation. Knox cracked his knuckles in what he probably thought was an intimidating display. What kind of conversation? You going to call our parents? Send us to the principal. We've heard it all before. Before Harper could respond, Bryce held up a hand to silence his enforcer. He was studying the new teacher with the calculating gaze of a predator sizing up unexpected resistance. Something about her demeanor not matching his expectations. Most educators at this point would be showing fear or anger, giving him ammunition for complaints to administration. Instead, Harper Mitchell stood perfectly still, her hands relaxed at her sides, watching him with the kind of patient attention that suggested she was cataloging every detail for future reference. The bell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife, and sending students flowing toward the exits with the relief of survivors escaping a potential battleground. Bryce lingered near Harper's desk, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something else, something chemical that her trained senses recognized as artificial enhancement. "This isn't over," he whispered, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Harper met his gaze without blinking, her own voice equally quiet, but carrying an undertone that made him take an involuntary step backward. "I know, but you might want to think carefully about what comes next." As the classroom emptied, Harper sat alone among the scattered desks and fluorescent hum, processing what had just occurred while her mind automatically shifted into tactical assessment mode. She'd revealed nothing of her true capabilities, but Bryce's aggression had forced her to establish boundaries that would inevitably lead to escalation. The question wasn't whether he would challenge her again, but when and how severely. Her phone buzzed with a text from Riley Santos, the young history teacher who'd become her closest ally during orientation week. "Heard Bryce paid you a visit. You okay?" Harper smiled grimly as she typed back, "Nothing I can't handle. But I have a feeling things are about to get interesting." She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be, or that, within 72 hours, her carefully maintained facade would crumble in exactly 12 seconds of explosive violence that would change Ridgemont High forever. The escalation came 72 hours later during Harper's third period advanced literature class, when Bryce decided that subtle intimidation wasn't producing the desired results. Knox Harrison had positioned himself directly behind Harper's desk, his wrestler's bulk creating an imposing shadow that would have sent most substitute teachers scurrying for administrative backup. What he hadn't anticipated was Harper's ability to move through his space like water flowing around stone, her steps so precisely calculated that she never quite gave him the collision he was hoping to provoke. "Excuse me," she said politely, reaching past Knox for her lesson materials, her movement forcing him to either step back or admit he was deliberately blocking her path. The simple maneuver left him looking clumsy and obvious, his intimidation tactic exposed as amateur theater. Tanner Brooks was live-streaming the interaction to his growing audience, his phone tracking Harper's every movement while his followers flooded the comments with anticipation. What they captured instead was a woman who seemed to possess an almost supernatural awareness of spatial dynamics. Never quite where Knox expected her to be, always one step ahead of his ham-fisted attempts at physical intimidation. "Weird how some people just can't stay in their lane," Knox muttered, flexing his shoulders in a way that made his Letterman jacket strain against his muscles. Harper paused in her preparations, her hands moving through what appeared to be another nervous, fidgeting routine. "You know," she said conversationally, "I studied anatomy extensively during my education degree. Did you know there are specific pressure points that can relieve tension headaches almost instantly?" The comment seemed innocuous enough, delivered with the kind of helpful teacher enthusiasm that usually made students roll their eyes, but something in Harper's tone made Knox hesitate, uncertainty flickering across his features as he processed whether she was offering medical advice or something else entirely. Before he could respond, Bryce's voice cut through the classroom atmosphere like a scalpel. "Speaking of education, Ms. Mitchell, I've been doing some research on our new faculty addition." He held up his phone, screen displaying what looked like search results. "Funny thing about the internet, it never really forgets anything." Harper's breathing remained steady, but her peripheral vision caught the shift in classroom dynamics as students sensed the approach of genuine drama. Riley Santos, who'd been observing from the doorway, stepped fully into the room with the instincts of someone recognizing potential crisis. "Did you know?" Bryce continued, his voice carrying the lazy satisfaction of a cat playing with wounded prey. that our sweet Ms. Mitchell here has some interesting extracurricular background. Division II Mixed Martial Arts, state championship level competition. Quite the warrior princess hiding behind that suburban teacher facade. The revelation hit the classroom like a physical shockwave. Students sitting up straighter as they processed the disconnect between Harper's mild appearance and the lethal credentials Bryce had just exposed. Knox took an involuntary step backward, his bullying confidence evaporating as he recalculated the risk assessment of his intimidation campaign. Harper closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds, performing what looked like a calming breath, but was actually the mental shift she'd learned to make when transitioning from civilian to combatant. When she opened them again, something fundamental had changed in her expression, a stillness that suggested predatory patience rather than passive acceptance. "That was a long time ago," she said quietly, her voice carrying undertones that made every person in the room instinctively assess their distance from her position. "But skills like that don't just disappear, do they?" Bryce pressed, emboldened by what he mistook for defensive retreat. "I'm curious what made a cage fighter decide to become a high school teacher." Performance anxiety, afraid of real competition. The psychological attack was precisely calculated, designed to trigger defensive reactions that would give him ammunition for future character assassination. What Bryce didn't understand was that Harper had spent 6 years learning to weaponize calm, to turn patience into the sharpest blade in her arsenal. "I changed careers," Harper replied, "because I learned that the most dangerous fights happen outside the cage. In places like this, where institutional power protects predators and victims, are taught that silence equals survival." Riley Santos stepped closer, her phone discreetly positioned to record whatever was about to unfold. The young history teacher had spent weeks documenting the systematic harassment that plagued Ridgemont's most vulnerable students, building a case that she had been too afraid to present until now. Knox, apparently misreading Harper's restraint as weakness, decided to reassert his dominance through physical intimidation. He reached out to grab her shoulder, his fingers aimed at the exact spot that had sent countless teachers fleeing toward early retirement. What happened next occurred too quickly for most observers to fully process. Harper's hand moved with fluid precision, intercepting Knox's wrist in a grip that looked gentle but felt like industrial machinery engaging. Her fingers found pressure points with surgical accuracy, applying just enough force to send sharp messages through his nervous system while creating zero visible damage. To anyone watching, it appeared she'd simply caught his hand, but Knox felt the unmistakable sensation of controlled power that could escalate to genuine harm without warning. "You were saying something about pressure points for headaches," Harper said conversationally, her grip maintaining perfect pressure as Knox's face cycled through confusion and dawning recognition. "The technique works through neural pathway interruption, very effective for relieving various types of discomfort." As Knox tried to pull away and discovered that he couldn't. Harper's grip wasn't painful, but it was absolutely immovable. For the first time in his high school career, the wrestling captain found himself physically controlled by someone he'd underestimated, his intimidation tactics neutralized by superior technical knowledge. Bryce's reaction was immediate and volcanic, his face flushing red as he processed the reality that his enforcer had been neutralized by a woman who looked like she should be teaching elementary school art classes. "Let him go right now," he snarled, stepping forward with the kind of aggressive posturing that had cowed countless authority figures. Harper released Knox's wrist, her movement so controlled that he stumbled backward from his own resistance. "Of course," she said mildly, as if they'd just concluded a friendly demonstration rather than a display of martial superiority. Tanner's live stream had exploded with viewer engagement, his follower count climbing rapidly as social media algorithms detected viral content in real time. The comments section moved too fast to read, a digital waterfall of shock and excitement as thousands of strangers witnessed the systematic deconstruction of Ridgemont High's most feared bullying crew. Bryce Caldwell wasn't finished, his pride wounded beyond rational thought by the public demonstration of his crew's vulnerability. "You think you're tough because you know some karate moves," he demanded, his voice rising as other students gathered in the hallway. "This isn't some suburban dojo, sweetheart. This is the real world, where actions have consequences." Harper's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the last vestiges of her teacher persona falling away to reveal something far more dangerous underneath. "You're absolutely right," she said quietly, her voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded explosive violence. "Actions do have consequences. Are you prepared for yours?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a lit fuse, drawing every eye in the room as students recognized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Riley Santos felt her pulse quicken as she realized Harper Mitchell was done hiding, done allowing institutional corruption to masquerade as authority. Bryce made his fatal mistake in that moment, interpreting Harper's restraint as fear rather than tactical patience. He stepped into her personal space with confident swagger, his hand reaching toward her with the casual entitlement that had defined his entire existence. 12, Harper whispered, beginning the countdown that would transform her from invisible educator to viral legend. Time seemed to slow as Bryce's overconfident advance met Harper's perfect timing, her hidden training condensing into the most technically flawless rear-naked choke anyone in Ridgemont High had ever witnessed. The submission was so smooth and effortless that observers couldn't process what they'd seen, ending with the school's untouchable quarterback unconscious on the classroom floor. Tanner's livestream had reached 28,000 simultaneous viewers and climbing rapidly. Within hours, Tashed, Ridgemont. Teacher would trend globally, Harper's 12-second demonstration becoming a rallying cry for educators everywhere. "Sometimes," she said to the stunned classroom, "the best lesson plan is teaching bullies about consequences." When Principal Northcott arrived later, she found a completely transformed learning environment. The viral footage would ultimately expose years of systematic corruption, proving that sometimes the most important lessons came from unexpected sources.